Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Swiswiki. Coming up, Tonga's Prime Minister resigns from the top job. Also,
there is a standpoint from which we can talk to which no one needs to lecture each other.
No surprises for Bougainville MP and Panguna reports, and
what we're seeing across the world and other places is a bit more worrying with the H5N1 influenza.
The impacts of bird flu. Tonga's outgoing Prime Minister says it was better to let someone else lead the country than go back and forth over a motion of no confidence. Huakavemeliku Siasi Sovaleni resigned on the floor of Parliament ahead of the vote. He will remain an MP until the next national election in about 10 months' time. Huakavemeliku spoke with Lydia Lewis, who began by asking what he said in Tongan in his resignation speech in Parliament.
Basically, I just thank those who supported me, and to me, this is the best way forward for Tonga. That I resign, then hopefully we get someone there who will take it forward for the next 9 or 10 months before the new general election.
What did it mean to you to lead your country through these times? We've had an eruption, we had COVID.
I was happy that I was there to actually help. I was happy that we managed to do a project that actually helped Tonga. And that's part of my speech. I appreciate the support in getting over the COVID-19, the volcanic eruptions, and what have you. So I have people there who actually work with me on those projects. I just want to thank them for all their support and all the work they put in.
What are you most proud of? What is your proudest moment?
There are a few highlights. One of them is actually setting up the National University. And the other one is actually securing funding to get a second cable. Similarly, the setup of building a new hospitals in Maori, but most probably the proudest projects are working with the kids on the developing 48 ECE schools and working on the curriculum to make it, a little more relevant to today's challenges and so forth. So yes, I haven't really actually narrowed it down, but those are some of the highlights.
What was the reason for you resigning?
I believe that me as Prime Minister, it will probably gonna. It's better to actually have a new Prime Minister to actually lead Tonga in the next 10 months or so. So it's better for me just to leave.
And you mentioned the Constitution and one of the reasons for resigning. What was the section that you were quoting?
That's the section that actually provides for me to resign. So I resigned based on that clauses. 51(2)(c).
And it sounds like the opposition was gaining support. Did you feel or know that they had enough to...
Well, you don't know what the number is going to be until the voting, but instead of going to and from, I think it's better for everybody that I just leave and they come up with someone else to actually lead the country.
And there were murmurings that His Royal Highness, the King, supported the motion. Were you aware of these rumours? Is there any...
We had rumours, but I think it would be good for you to talk to a palace office or someone. But we just focus on our issues.
Were there more than rumours though? Did you receive a letter or a message notification?
I don't. I'm not going to comment on that. We answered the queries on the motion, and I just want to let it be.
So what next for you?
Well, having a good night rest will be a nice thing to do. And to sit back and relax and reflect and hopefully continue contributing to the development of Tonga.
Will you still be involved in Parliament? I understand that you've resigned.
I'm still in Parliament. So, yes.
And what next for you in Parliament? What are you hoping to take on next?
Well, there's not much left, given that around about August or somewhere around there, then we're going to election mode. So we will probably having a caretaker government for the last 3 months up until November. So great to actually reconnect and strengthen our relationship with our constituencies and take some time out.
And it's been a big year. You came into the role when it was turmoil, to say the least. What are your reflections on the year for the region when you take a step back and have a look at the big picture?
I think the region is, for lack of a better word, coming alive. I think we have very good leaders. We're passionate about the Pacific. We're passionate about some of the key issues in the Pacific, like climate change and so forth. So I'm happy with where the region, especially with the current leaders and the issues that we've been championing.
Do you have any regrets of your time in office?
Well, the regret is not having enough time with my family, but now I can address that regret. Of course, as Prime Minister, there's always competing priorities and what have you, and there might be something that I miss, but we will try to do our best with given the limited resources that we have and the time that we have, especially on projects, on initiatives that have the most impact, a meaningful impact on Tonga.
Siasi Sovalini says he hopes to continue contributing to the development of Tonga as an MP. An MP in the autonomous Papua New Guinea region of Bougainville says the report into the environmental and human rights legacy of the Panguna mine gives her satisfaction. The report, released on Friday, identifies ongoing environmental and human rights issues. Mining multinational Rio Tinto was behind the development of the mine. Fionila Roka Metbob, the MP who led the push for the assessment to be done, spoke with Don Wiseman.
If I'm to start off with a quote from Bougainville's first president, Kabwe, where he said in 2001 that the fights are not over. We've just brought the independence fight onto the table, but we yet to bring Panguna fight onto the table. It brings a lot of satisfaction to me personally, because at least I've been able in my time in this generation to fulfill the desire and the wish of our leaders who have gone ahead.
The report's not going to be telling you anything you didn't already know, is it?
No, it doesn't come by surprise. It's actually just, for me, the significant thing is that now there is a anchor, there is a basis when we're talking about accountability of the process of Panguna. There is a standpoint from which we can talk to, which no one needs to lecture each other, but it is materialized and it now changes the form from the state of understanding that a lot of things we talk about is based on assumption. It is no longer an assumption, but it is a verified truth that, yes, Panguna is an issue that we need to deal with. And it is an entry as well for me. It opened, the report when it came out, it opened the way and approach into dealing with the myriad of issues that we are battling on Bougainville. For me, it's a standpoint from which we can now say that Panguna is a matter separate from independence that needs to have its own approaches that we need to take as stakeholders involved into settling the issue before understanding the next steps going forward.
All right. Rio Tinto clearly seems to have changed its attitudes in a lot of ways. It backed this scheme, didn't it? But it hasn't said what it might do following this assessment report coming out. It has announced that it's entered a memorandum of understanding with the government and with Bougainville Copper to look at a possible remedy mechanism. So have you had any discussions yourself with Rio?
Yes, as expected. The behavior of the company is changing, but my stance in terms of getting the company to give its public commitment and will never change. And it means that even if that has to go, for me, I am committed to ensuring that whether we like it or not, it is writing on the wall for us to deal with.
The report talks about, or makes 24 recommendations. What are the critical ones within that? What are the most critical?
For me, the most critical is dealing with basics for the people and committing to a lasting solution where if the company can commit to lasting solution, especially where basic survival intervention is concerned, that is the most important thing. And also relocation and committing to an independent assessment fund. They are the three top priorities for me.
Maori and Pasifika would be highly vulnerable if a bird flu outbreak ever hit New Zealand, according to an Auckland expert. Dr. Natalie Nitzler of Auckland University says the current H7N6 strain of avian influenza has only affected poultry and has been well contained. However, another strain, the H5N1, has caused outbreaks overseas in mammals and a small number of farm workers. Margot Staunton asked Dr. Nitzler about the new threat.
Well, the real concern is actually probably not the outbreak that we're having at the moment with the H7N6 influenza that's been found in the poultry farm. We believe that this will be contained, and it seems to have been contained very well at this stage. It's also only affecting birds, whereas what we're seeing across the world in other places is a bit more worrying with the H5N1 influenza. What we're seeing with that one is it is also a bird flu, but it has crossed over into other animals, particularly into cows. It's been found in seals and cats, and it has infected humans. And although we are not seeing any human-to-human spread in that particular influenza overseas yet, the longer that virus spends inside other animals and spreading amongst other animals, the more it can adapt to spreading between humans. And that's when we might see another influenza pandemic arise. But for the moment, with the H7N6 influenza that has been found in birds and poultry in Otago, it looks like this is quite well contained. The plan has been to sort of contain and cull, and so far it's been restricted to that one initial farm. So we're fortunate in that we were really prepared for this to happen, and so far it's going to plan.
How easily could that other strain come to New Zealand?
Quite easily, actually. It's something that we can't really control. So unlike COVID, where we could stop the spread of humans bringing it in by closing the borders, with H5N1, avian influenzas are carried by birds, and that particular one is carried by birds that migrate across the globe. And now that we know that it's been found in almost every other part of the world except for here, we can't control those migratory birds coming in and out of New Zealand. So it could arrive any day, but we are really working hard to monitor our wildlife to make sure that we could contain it if it does come in. And the best thing to do is, if you do see a whole lot of sick or dying dead birds together, is to report it to MPI, and they can help contain it if it does come in.
If it did come to New Zealand and eventually spread to the population, why are Maori and Pacific Island populations more at risk or more vulnerable?
So what we've seen with historical pandemics, all of the historical pandemics, but particularly the influenza pandemic in 1918, we saw that Māori had a much higher mortality rate than non-Māori and non-Pacific also, although records were less so for Pacific in those days. But what we did see is that for Māori, the mortality rate was over 7 times higher than non-Māori in New Zealand at that time. Now, there are a lot of different factors that make Māori and Pacific people more vulnerable to pandemics. Some of that is deprivation and the effects of that. But there are other reasons that we are still trying to understand. For example, are there any other things about the virus or the people that make a difference in that susceptibility?
Do you mean genetic factors or...?
Possibly. We are looking into that and studying that at the moment, but at the moment we don't have all the answers, so that's where more research is going in. But we do know that from historical pandemics, Pacific and Māori are more susceptible to severe disease during a pandemic time, which is a real reason why influenza vaccination is important. And if a pandemic did arise and a new vaccine came out, it would be really important to try and make sure that our population was well immunised.
So do you have ideas yourself as to why this might be? You mentioned deprivation. Do you mean poverty? Is that what you mean?
So we know that we are overrepresented in poverty and deprivation, and we also know that there are a lot of kind of background diseases like cardiovascular disease, heart problems, perhaps kidney problems or diabetes that make Māori and Pacific people have higher rates in general than the non-Māori, non-Pacific population, which can mean that you have a greater risk of a severe outcome from influenza. And we know this across the board, not just for Māori and Pacific, but if you have cardiovascular issues, if you have diabetes, you're much more vulnerable to severe disease from a number of different viral infections. And so obviously if you also come from a background of poverty, we know that this also predisposes you to greater risk of severe disease from infectious diseases, and that is across the globe, not just in our populations. So it's really about trying to elevate all of our health and getting us all out of deprivation so that we have a better chance at facing these infectious diseases.
Dr. Nitzler stressed that the risk to humans is low and there's yet no evidence of human-to-human spread overseas. The Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission reached some momentous decisions at its recent annual conference in Suva. That's the view of a member of environmental watchdog group, the Pew Charitable Trust International Fisheries Project, Glenn Holmes. The agency has now started the process of embracing electronic monitoring of catches, but Holmes told Don Wiseman one of the most significant developments was the adoption of a set of labour standards for crew.
And that's the first tuna RFMO to have done one. So that's a big step forward, even though it's not one that Pew was following very closely.
What are the labour standards? What have they changed?
Well, they've set standards. So they've set a conservation and management measure that determines conditions for crew on fishing vessels. You know, it's something that exists in just about every other workplace, but hasn't existed within the tuna RFMOs yet. So WCPFC has set a benchmark, and hopefully it will have knock-on effects to other RFMOs.
Well, that's good. And as far as electronic monitoring, which Pew was very keen on, there's an interim arrangement.
Yes, so the Commission has agreed a set of standards for electronic monitoring use, and this effectively opens the door to data that's being collected by EM systems to be incorporated into the WCPFC dataset. And the WCPFC was actually the last of the tuna RFMOs to get these on board. And this is a critical stepping stone to increasing independent data collection across particularly the long-lining sector of tuna fisheries. So we see it as a really, really important step forward for the world's biggest tuna fishery. And we're very, very pleased that these standards have been adopted. The next step is to take this further forward and fully incorporate into the management regime a process for having electronic monitoring as a completely typical operating procedure in the same way that on-board observers are now.
Why was there a reluctance to go all the way this time?
It's simply the amount of work that's involved, I think. It's that the measure that's been adopted this time involved a lot of nitty-gritty, a lot of in-the-weeds discussions. And so it would have taken more than the amount of time that was available to take it even further in a single year. It's the same process that other RFMOs have followed as well.
All right. Now, another issue that you and I have talked about, transshipment, and there's been a long time a push to improve the transparency of transshipment on the open seas. No progress there, or?
No. No, that was an enormous disappointment. The WCPFC hasn't upgraded or improved its transshipment measure in over 15 years now. Every other tuna RFMO has improved its management of transshipping at sea, and the failure of the Commission to come to an agreement after extensive discussions this year and even more extensive discussions last year, it's a failure of the Commission, really. It is seriously, seriously disappointing, and I hope that the members that were unable to come to a compromise situation that improved the management of transshipment take a look at what's happened over particularly the last couple of years, and come to the Commission next year with the intention of lifting the standards for transshipment in the Western Pacific. We are very, very disappointed at that outcome.
The Commission said to us in the past that NGOs love going on about this need for greater accountability, and they make this comparison with the other RFMOs, but those organisations are for areas where there's very little fish left, so it's irrelevant.
No, that's not actually true. The Western and Central Pacific is by far the richest tuna fishing grounds in the world. I mean, there are more tuna caught in that RFMO than all the others combined. And it was the case previously that the status of stocks in the Western and Central Pacific was deemed to be in a healthier state than the other tuna RFMOs. However, those stock status indicators are no longer like that. So the stocks in the other RFMOs are not deemed to be in as poor a condition as they had previously been thought, either through improved management or through an improved understanding of the science. So it's not by any means the case that it shouldn't really be an issue in the Pacific. It should be an issue in the other tuna RFMOs. Transparency in the management of effectively a public resource is critical. And if people want to have confidence in the processes that are managing where their tuna are coming from, then these processes need to be transparent.
One of the big recent concerns in fisheries around the Pacific has been climate change and the impact that this will have on migratory species. Did they talk about this last week?
Yes, they did. Climate change is a critical topic across the Pacific for a range of reasons. But within the tuna sphere, it's very important because the tuna fisheries is an incredibly important economic resource, particularly for the islands. And there has been work in the past that has shown that with climate change, it is anticipated that the stocks ranges will shift, and that has implications for future planning and for the potential income over the next coming decades. And so the Commission has done a bit of work on how it is to address climate change. It will be undertaking a review of the risk that climate change poses to its management regimes. Climate change will be incorporated into the science of the Commission to get a better understanding of the future impacts. And so the Commission is grabbing this with both hands and not ignoring the elephant in the room of climate change.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā soifua.